Wrestling Rebooked. Spoiler in Andeve, putting wrestling into submission. Welcome to Wrestling Rebooked with Spoiler and Andeve, rewriting your favorite angles the way we want to believe. Putting wrestling into submission. Finally, that time has come. We used to rely on Meltzer, now we bang our own drum. Wrestling Rebooked. Spoiler in Andeve, putting wrestling into submission. The Spot Monkey is here, shooting from the hip, back to break more, and ready to let rip. Spoiler is the host. Will his mic be ready to go? He loves a Mac Clinic, and we're ready to start the show. From Mania to Survivor Series, a wrestling podcast. Each match rebooked, fresh views are cast. Wrestling Rebooked. Spoiler in Andeve, putting wrestling into submission. Our finger is on the pulse for all the latest news. What's going on with Vince? We don't really get his views. We love a doc and review, old school to new. I think it's time to tap out. Hit the music. We're through. Wrestling Rebooked. Spoiler in Andeve, putting wrestling into submission.
Hello and welcome to Wrestling Rebooked, putting wrestling into submission. And we are back for episode 16, the season premiere on YouTube. Hello and welcome. As you can see, we have gimmicked up the screens. So you've got our Twitter, Insta handles by our names, and you can see our YouTube link up above. On today's show, packed episodes, we're going to have a WrestleMania review, WrestleMania 37 that's gone down in the last week. Plus, we're going to be talking to independent wrestling journalist Tom Colohue. My name is Spoiler, and to take us through this all today, co-host, shooting from the hip, gimmicked up, the Spot Monkey, Andeve.
Hello, good evening, morning, afternoon, depending where you're listening and watching to this. How you doing?
Good. For those watching on YouTube, do you want to sort of talk us through your gimmick there, or?
Nah, not really. It's basically there was just some cheap products on the WWE website, so I bought them. Although 3 of my favorite current wrestlers are referenced in the attire, so keep an eye out for that.
Real shrewd analysts amongst us will be able to work that out, will we?
I don't think anyone would care, but yeah, if you need a reason to keep watching because you don't want to listen to us talk, see if you can spot those 3 wrestlers.
Should mention as well, the audio is still available on normal podcast channels. Right, let's get into it, shall we? WrestleMania 37, although it's now just called WrestleMania, drop the numbers, has gone down. Night 1 was the 10th of April, 2021. And there's a fair amount to talk about before the first match even. Vince makes an appearance. There's a weather delay. There's a load of borderline impromptu promos. Titus O'Neil and Hulk turn up. Initial thoughts on the opening, the return of fans, etc.
I guess it's only fitting that after a year of truncated programming and COVID interrupted broadcasts, that the biggest event, the relaunch, is then truncated and slowed down even further. I thought the Vince opening, I think we'll probably see that for years and years to come. I think he knows that as well. I thought that the interviews were actually pretty decent, and it suggests maybe that WWE should allow their stars some more flexibility in their promos and not always have them scripted to the nth degree. And Titus and Hogan was as cringeworthy as you would expect it to be, despite all the great stuff Hogan did in the 80s, maybe a little bit into the early 90s. He's really persona non grata given the racism accusations, or has been proven against him. And I think people that were there were booing. So 2 positives and 1 super negative, I guess.
It's as cringy as the second night, which I actually think was even worse.
And they're dressed as pirates or whatever they were doing. Yeah.
But I agree. Some of the impromptu promos were actually quite good. I think Kevin Owens, especially McIntyre, who sort of just captured the moment quite well, saying that, he's gone through this whole year wrestling with no fans, and he's made to wait another 20 minutes to ultimately lose anyway. But so maybe nice segue to the first match. Drew McIntyre opened up with Bobby Lashley. You couldn't be happy about that. The WWE title in the first match, 18 minutes and 20 seconds.
20 minutes is a good amount of time to give them, but on this one I'm slightly torn. Yeah, it seems a bit ridiculous to have the title match going out first, especially given that McIntyre has carried the company on his back, but equally the first time with fans, the idea to put on a big match first rather than a pre-show makes sense. And of course, everyone was saying in advance, once it was announced that McIntyre was on first, well, this will be a chance for him to capture the title, everyone to scream and shout, big celebration. McIntyre walks away with the belt, which of course is exactly what didn't happen.
But as soon as they decide McIntyre isn't winning the belt, maybe that is the argument to put it on first.
Why?
Because it's not a babyface going over.
Oh, I see. Well, but then it defaults back to, well, it's a title match, so it shouldn't be on first. So if they're going to have it on first, it has to be because the babyface is going to win the title, screams and shouts and cheers, and let's get everything off on a good footing. But once they're not going to do that, then why have them out first? I don't know. But again, I suppose it's all twisted a little bit because there's 2 nights. So really, if you're not ending the show, maybe you do want to be opening the show. Yeah, I don't know. I've never been in either position.
Right, but Banks and Bel-Air are always going to headline, right? We're always going to main event. So this has got to go on somewhere.
Then I suppose it might as well go on first. Although seeing your title match does hurt going out first.
Yeah, I get that. Nevertheless, as for the match itself, I quite enjoyed sort of the big match feel about it. Some excellent sort of psychology and facials as leading into the first lockup. It was a hard-hitting match, wasn't it? Like some heavy moved. It sounded like the crowd noise was still being piped in. Maybe you couldn't quite tell, like the fans wearing masks or should have been wearing masks. But never like some heavy hits. 3 Future Shock DDTs. The arc on the edge of the ring. It was good stuff, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a really good match, and of course, Lashley and McIntyre had a fairly good match last year at Backlash, so almost 12 months ago. They've been kept apart in the run up to this, and Michael Cole, in one of his better parts of commentary of the weekend, described it as 2 balls going at it, and it really did look at it. It really did look like a 50-50 match, not in terms of 50-50 booking, but either could win. Both were pretty strong. McIntyre hit a couple of suplexes and then a third and goes for a pin. And then Lashley responds with, I think, the Dominator and a moderated sort of choke slam, which I think was a spine buster. So it was really sort of back and forth tennis match almost between 2 greats, sort of really, really going at it hard. Like I said, a trifecta of Future Shock DDTs was really nice. Haven't seen that before. McIntyre, again, he carried the match quite well, probably a little bit more on his shoulders than Lashley. He dropped in a Kimura lock. So I thought maybe a bit slow to start. I guess the ring was probably wet. They'd been waiting, all that. I thought it built really nicely. Yeah. My only sort of negative caveat there, of course there is one, I just didn't quite think they played up the ending enough. It needed a lot. They needed a replay and the commentators to really push home, this is what's happened. Because at the time I didn't notice.
The actual finisher match you're talking about. So
yeah. So when MVP does some sort of distraction, which I'm still not even sure what it was, that causes Lashley to turn around and then he passes out in the hurt lock, which I think looked good, kept him strong. Yeah. But I just think if you're going to do something like that, you need to make it explicit to the fans and to the crowd, right? I still not entirely sure what McIntyre was distracted by.
Yeah, so that was really hammered home by Michael Cole. So hence why you knew it was part of the actual finish, as opposed to something ad-libbed.
Yeah, but I just think when your commentator has to deliver that amount of
clarity,
reframing or clarification, then you actually want to see it, and then the commentator adds to it, not what, because I didn't see it. But other than that, up to that point, maybe a little bit of a slow start, which is to be expected, but that they really did go hammer and tongs, 50-50, two massive specimens, aren't they? Yeah. And I'm looking forward to seeing them again at Wrestlemania Backlash.
God. Okay. Yeah. Well, before we digress too far, I agree. There was just that added a little bit of emotion, a little added bit of wow, we're in front of fans for the first time, and that just took the match up another notch. I agree with you on the finish. It wasn't clear. The irony is, had there been no fans, you probably would have understood it or heard it a bit better.
Yeah.
So it's slightly ironic that they chose to go for a finish like that for the first match back in front of fans.
And what do you think then about the fact that with that finish, Lashley got the victory and McIntyre, who everyone expected to win, has lost?
Well, as I've advocated on previous episodes here, I wanted Lashley to win. I hope he has a lengthy run. You build him as a big heel and let the babyface challengers come, and you get him over as the star that he should be. So for me, I was happy with that result. I think it's the right result. McIntyre's had his run, but wait, there's going to be another match
at WrestleMania Backlash. I think you're right. I think the reason we thought it was going on first and what people were saying in advance was, well, it's going to be the chance for McIntyre to almost win the title that he won in front of no one. But of course, Lashley wins. And I think in the long term, you're right, it makes sense because we can build another main event star, which when you look at Orton and was it Strowman, who were both in the number one contenders on Raw? Well, they're both excellent and should be in the main event, but they've not been built very well recently. So you see how quickly they can drop down. Lashley is title holder. We get another main event star and we can enjoy the chase of McIntyre, which I think is where the interest lies. Once he's got the title, that's the end of Lashley, and that's the end of that peak.
Yeah. It's a bit of a shame that there was no Cedric Alexander, Shelton Benjamin ringside. They've been through that sort of process with the Hurt Business throughout the sort of build of Lashley, and it would have looked excellent if they had all four of them coming out, three of them in the suits or whatever.
It's a bit inexplicable, isn't it? No one's really explained why they've been split up. The talk on Twitter is that there's a lot of anguish and discontent about the fact they've been split up. And then on the Monday following, those two guys from Retribution turned up. Yeah. So they were doing the Alexander and Benjamin role. That just seems, and also there's been no feud. So if you're gonna split them up, have them feud for the title or feud for something. Build Alexander as a pay-per-view opponent. That just smacks of WWE being really poor. I mean, it didn't take away from the context of this match that we've seen, but it probably does take away from the longer-term booking and recognition of what's happened.
Yeah. And as we say, it totally misses the point as to why Lashley and MVP are so over in the first place. But yeah, okay. So really, that's the rebooking angle, isn't it?
I think so. Well, two things really: just make the end really, really explicit, and then take away the inexplicability of having no Alexander and Benjamin.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, next up, we had a tag team turmoil match with the winners receiving a shot at the Women's Tag Team Championship on night 2. Natalya and Tamina ended up winning, getting the victory over the Riot Squad, Liv Morgan and Ruby Riott. It took 14 minutes and 15 seconds, and hopefully our analysis will be shorter than my description.
Is this we didn't do a 30-second or no, positives and negatives, isn't it? What do you want first, positives or negatives?
Let's start with the positives.
Okay. Positives are it's good to see women being showcased on the WrestleMania event, and it's good to see so many of them involved. It's good to see the Riots as a tag team because they look like a tag team, and there's some quick double team combos with them, like a midsection headbutt and a super kick and a senton, I think. So that was quite good. And probably they got the winners correct in Natalya and Tamina. There's a bit of build there, and everyone, I don't know. I don't think anyone did want to see Jax and Tamina sort of face off, but we were told we did. So I think those probably were the positives for me. Positives for you?
Hard to chuck in anything you haven't already covered.
That's the benefit of going first.
Struggling. It was good to see Riot Squad actually on a WrestleMania card and see some of these women on a WrestleMania card. It's a shame they didn't go over. I think they at least got the positions of each team right. Beyond that, I think we're on to negatives, aren't we?
Go on, then you go first. Negatives.
The whole concept of a tag team turmoil was just completely ridiculous. You had a tag team ready-made for the last year in the Iconics that could have delivered this tag team
Break my heart
match. Yeah. You didn't necessarily need to have this match in the first place. You don't need two women's tag teams on two separate nights. But I get that they wanted to get probably most of these guys on the card.
Women.
Right. Carmella and Billie Kay just looked awkward and thrown together. I think Michael Cole even said that they were thrown together.
Yeah.
God dear. Mandy Rose has fallen down the ramp.
That's a positive, isn't it? Not negative.
Oh dear. And that's it. You just didn't need to be on the card, and clearly it's a toilet break.
Yeah, 100%. So I would say I just hammer home the point that I don't like this fact that, and they did it in NXT as well. I didn't like it in NXT. So it's something about the women. I don't like the fact that there's a number one contender on one night for the second night.
Yeah.
Almost by definition there, you're saying the second night is bigger. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but I mean, have that on your TV show. So I didn't like that concept. I thought mostly the match was pretty poor. Certainly the first few teams in were until the Riots got in there, were weak. And probably the biggest, and it's hard to say, I think Lana's trying really hard and working really hard and doing the best she can. But she's so far short of being on a WrestleMania card. When you think of who wasn't on that card, Nakamura, for example, that straight away, he's not on the card yet. She's there. And there's one point where she does a kick to Billie Kay and she misses by about a foot. And I don't mean her foot, I mean a length of a foot. Yeah. And Billie Kay does some sort of set. It's just not good enough. So my negatives are that it really wasn't a good enough match for the WrestleMania card. And I don't like the concept of allowing it for the next night.
Well, Billie Kay's been fired, so she's got a confidence there.
Right, avoided the kick, but not the firing. Yeah, cool.
Next up, Cesaro defeated Seth Rollins at 11 minutes and 35 seconds. This is a bit more like it, wasn't it? Like it was almost as if this match where they've said, right, you got 10 minutes to just go out there and absolutely tear the house down, and pretty much that's exactly what they did, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think this was my favorite match of the first day. I also thought that I thought the 10 minutes was short. I think they could have done with more. It feels like they could do more, but having seen Smackdown, maybe it's just been positioned to elevate Cesaro for what's coming to him next. I thought there was a good vignette to start as the preamble about Cesaro's never had a one-on-one match and all that sort of stuff. And then it just exploded straight from the start like you wanted, with Cesaro hitting that European uppercut and a corkscrew springboard uppercut, like straight away. Let's just go. And like you said, you've got some time, tear the house down, go. And that's how it started.
The superplex into the Falcon Arrow, like, just never gets boring to see. Like, just the athleticism and the skill to be able to do that.
Yeah, the only thing I wonder with that is, why does Rollins always go for the pin? Because it's always a 2 count.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe another subject, isn't it, in terms of force finishes?
Yeah. What did you think of the Rollins? He did a corkscrew frog splash, just turning in the air. Like, they're obviously, someone's been listening to you and they just decided to innovate all their frog splashes on this show.
Yeah.
What do you think of it?
Corkscrew off the top. Yeah. Absolutely loved it. And the actual timing of it, not timing of the specific move, but timing of it at that point of the match. It was building maybe 7-8 minutes in. I just popped. Yeah,
really good. I hadn't seen it before. In fact, there's a few moves in that match. Rollins did a reversal to sort of kick Cesaro on the back of the head. I'd never seen that. I'd never seen him sort of do that before. And I thought the reversals in and out of the neutralizer that Rollins and Cesaro were trying to do looked athletic, and both men were sort of. Cesaro's a massive guy as well, but flipping onto his feet. And even the UFO, I haven't seen Cesaro do that for a long, long time, maybe at all in WWE. So if you're at WrestleMania, you've got 10 minutes, bust out some moves.
That's what we want, though, from WrestleMania, right? Otherwise, and we'll come on to this with some other matches later, you want something to be different, to be special, to be kept for a big event. And here we have that.
Yeah, and the kick to the back of the head that Rollins did, I was actually saying or thinking, what's he doing? Like, what's going on there? So as he was doing it. So, yeah, very good.
Okay, do you need to evacuate or?
No, it's all right. It stopped. I thought like Right to Censor were going to come down to the ring and kick me out of here, but no, I'm all right. It was a really good match. I wish it had a little bit longer, and I also wish there was a bit more on the line.
Yeah,
they've just sort of gone, here's 2 excellent wrestlers, off you go. They're very good friends from Table of Three and stuff. They've talked about being roadies and buddies for a long time. It was a really, really good match. And it was good to see the responses of the fans to Cesaro.
Yeah.
Which the WWE probably cherry picked, right? But that was nice to see as well.
Yeah, but fine.
Yeah, of course.
It's funny, like, and I've got the card in front of me, and you actually read down the card, and this match actually sticks out like a sore thumb because there's no title jeopardy.
Right.
It's just a match.
Yeah.
And I think that's maybe why it just sticks out as maybe a little bit like what's going on here is just two guys fighting, but
yeah, it's missing that top level for it to be because there's no jeopardy. There needs to be something on the line, but and maybe WWE doesn't do that very well. Maybe not as well as AEW, where they sort of count score and they keep stuff. It always leads to something else. But it was a really, really good match. It's nice to have some new maneuvers, and there's a sort of smoothness to the way they were bouncing off one another. So I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. You rebooking?
I suppose just to put something on the line, but I don't know what that is because the Intercontinental and the US title are on the line elsewhere. But maybe if it's part of a better build, then that would be preferable.
Yeah.
Are you rebooking?
Not other again. You've got there before me, but not other than just making there's something more on the line for it, and I probably would have taken another 5 minutes of that.
Yeah, that's fair. I think probably rather than something on the line, I'd rather have another 5-6 minutes of them doing some stuff. Yeah.
Okay, next up we had AJ Styles and Omos. Is it
Right.
Omos?
Who cares?
Well, hold on. They were up against New Day tag team titles on the Raw side, 9 minutes and 45 seconds. Right. Little Q&A here, shall we?
All right, cool. I'll be rapid. Do you want to ask me first or shall I ask you first?
I'll ask you first, shall I?
All right, fine.
How about the build to this match?
Couldn't care less about the build. New Day are really good, and suddenly Styles and Omos are a tag team.
Best part?
Some of the New Day stuff where Xavier Woods is shouting out, we're cutting off the ring, Styles. That's why you're not a tag team. And they're the trombone that's still going. Like, that should be old, but that was the best part.
Worst part?
The fact that the whole match was used to build a guy that I don't think can wrestle very well. And that is our man, Omos, whatever you want to call him.
The result?
The same, really. I don't mind AJ Styles with a title, superb. But if you're going to take it off the New Day, which it doesn't hurt them, why are you putting it on Styles and Omos just to build a guy that I don't think can wrestle?
And overall, is there anything different you haven't already said?
Just reiterate the point and bore everybody. When they put Strowman in the main event and he was green, but he turned up with the Wyatts, he was able to do a few moves. He looked athletic. The same with the Giant or the Big Show years ago. I don't think Omos looks like he can wrestle. It was just a few kicks that didn't look like very much. It doesn't look like he's got the movement of a wrestler. I mean, he's a basketball player originally. So I just don't like the fact that the whole match was built. We'll have to censor it back. The whole match was built to put over Omos at the expense of the New Day and Styles. So I had to work very hard to achieve that.
Fair.
You want me to come back at you?
Come back at me.
While I wait for Bull Buchanan and whoever else was in that right to censor faction to get at me. What did you think of the build?
I didn't watch any of it. But literally, the only promo I saw was Styles saying, "Oh, I've never had a tag title. I've got a bodyguard. Let's be in for the tag titles at Mania."
No Kevin Costner as a bodyguard, though, is it?
But it was rushed and didn't have much thought gone into this match.
Worst part of the match?
The fact that New Day pretty much worked heels throughout the whole match just to be able to keep the narrative for Omos.
I hadn't thought of that. Best part of the match?
It was only 9 minutes and 45 seconds.
Same as Rollins and Cesaro, but a far worse match.
Yeah.
What do you think about the result?
I mean, fine. You can have... I don't mind the tag titles being on them. The match itself just didn't need to be the way it was to achieve that.
Yeah. And so then overall, concluding thoughts?
Yeah, concluding thoughts were, if you want to have... This is the way you want to go, and you want to get this monster over, then just have him come in and smash New Day up and have it as a squash match.
Right. but then probably not at WrestleMania.
Well, you could have it at WrestleMania. You know, you save some time on the card. Have an extra 5 minutes on Rollins and Cesaro that way.
Yeah, fair enough. Fine.
That's it done, really, isn't it?
Yeah. I didn't really care for the match at all, and it sort of smacks a little bit of just you got to get everything on WrestleMania. You don't need to.
Yeah. All right. Next up, we had Shane McMahon up against Braun Strowman in a steel cage. And that whole match was 11 minutes and 25 seconds. But I'm wondering if you can condense your thoughts into 30 seconds.
All right, 30-second review. Okay. I thought, are you going to time me? Or
I'm timing you now.
Okay. I thought Strowman looked phenomenal coming down the ramp. Absolutely fantastic. I don't know why Shane McMahon is on the card as though he's some sort of special feature like Lesnar has been in the past. There's a few decent spots like the breaking of the cage and the chucking of Shane off the top. It's fine for what it was. I'm glad Shane didn't win. And Strowman sort of did the inevitable with his bump. Fair enough, but I wouldn't have had it on the card at WrestleMania.
You've done that in 26 seconds.
Decent.
Good effort.
Ready?
I'm ready.
Hold on, I've got a different timer here.
Talk amongst yourselves.
Stopwatch, mate. Go.
If they wanted to do a bullying, you're not stupid angle, they could have achieved that with Strowman and someone else that wasn't on the card, as you mentioned, Nakamura or Ricochet, maybe as a little and large kind of guy. Didn't need to have Shane O'Mac on this card again. Anyway, nevertheless, the match itself just wasn't interested. Elias, loads of stuff overbooked. No one was selling chair shots, steel chairs. No one was selling kendo six.
I'm done, mate.
I think I've made my point.
Yeah. And again, we might be talking at the end about WrestleMania being 2 nights, but you're starting to talk about matches that can easily be scrubbed off the cards.
Yeah. All right. Next up, Bad Bunny and Damian Priest defeated The Miz and John Morrison. 15 minutes and 5 seconds. Booker T on commentary.
Yeah, fair enough. They had a few commentary people drop in during the course of the show, didn't they? The King and stuff as well. Not Elvis, Jerry.
Lawler was on the last match, we should have mentioned. But, couldn't get it in 30 seconds. Did you enjoy the bunnies that came down to the ring beforehand?
A little bit. I mean, I think it's funny, but I wasn't sure to start with that it was a Mickey take. I thought that might be Bad Bunny's actual entrance. I suppose maybe that feeds into the Miz gimmick. But also there was I saw someone saying, "This is the unfortunate moment that my partner chose to come in and watch what I was up to," and there's just a load of bunnies in the ring with Miz and Morrison. It is a little bit like, oh, if someone sees that and sees you watching wrestling, you think that's a bit embarrassing, but. Yeah. It's all right. But did you enjoy all those bunnies?
I thought it was quite funny. They could have just made it a classic WWE. They could have just made everything just a little bit shorter. Everything.
Yeah.
But yeah. As for the match itself, I think on the one hand, you can say, I think you've said it on the last episode about Bad Bunny. He's turned up at wrestling school. He's turned up and delivered that match. He's turned up on Raw every week. So on the one hand, fair enough. But equally, we didn't need 15 minutes of him largely on the offensive.
Yeah.
And The Miz and Morrison, like these two jacked up guys that with, 30 odd years of experience between them selling Bad Bunny, a skinny rapper.
If it was a fat rapper, would that be all right?
It just looked ridiculous. Okay, if Priest's injured, fair enough. Like, should he have been on the card if he's injured?
Yeah.
This could have worked. I actually think this could have worked. 'Cause obviously, Bad Bunny is so over. Has this, over the top entrance on the truck.
Yeah.
It's fine for what it is, but it just made everything look so silly by having so much offense.
It really depends, this match, on. And no one's right or wrong. It just depends what your perspective is. It really depends how you take it. And I think you take it in one of two ways. One is, well, in fact, before you even get to that, the first thing to say is that Bad Bunny made a hell of an appearance. That Canadian destroyer on the outside, he's flipping off the top rope. He's taking most of the match, I think, because Priest was injured. So first and foremost, and people are talking about, what are the best debuts of all time? For me, still Pat McCaffrey as a celebrity debut was better, but him and is it Ansel, whatever his name is, who had a match against Cody. So you can't really criticize Bad Bunny for his performance, right? Is that would you say that's the first bit?
We partly, but I mean, if you're saying, "Oh, Priest is injured, therefore, sorry, Bad Bunny, you're going to have to, take the rap for this one." No pun intended. Like, you just rebook the match differently, don't you?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I think that's the sort of other point. The first point is just on Bad Bunny. Like, I think he's delivered as well as you could expect to, but then everything else becomes off the perspective of, firstly, do you think that Bad Bunny should be in that spot? And the point is that for Vince or whoever, it's Bad Bunny gets more eyes on the product, so that's why you have Bad Bunny on the product. And that's the aim of the match, and that's all good. And Bad Bunny did a good thing, and people will watch it, and it get mainstream stuff and all that. The opposite is, by having Bad Bunny do that, what you're doing is making your penultimate champion, which is Miz, who was champion before Lashley. You're making him look like a mug. You're making Morrison look like a mug, and they've made him look like a mug all the time he's been here. And then you're looking for tag teams. Well, where are the tag teams going to come from if it can't be Miz and Morrison? So I understand from the perspective that if you want eyes on the product and you want more exposure, then you have Bad Bunny and you bring him in. And in that sense, he's done a good job. However, if you're talking about WWE struggling to make stars and long-term booking and poor creative, then actually bringing Bad Bunny in to beat the Miz and Morrison, who are now not a credible tag team. Miz was presented as a joke in the title match, then it just doesn't work. And for me personally, I'm not interested in more eyes on the product. I'm interested in watching some decent wrestling. And then Priest has gone and lost on Raw anyway. So it just wasn't quite for me, really. It's not really the thing I tune in for WrestleMania for, but I get there's other people with other views. It's allowed.
I think you can achieve both, can't you? You can have Bad Bunny on the card, and this is always going to happen now in modern day WWE. While the product's going in the direction that it is, you're going to have these kind of celebrities, and it's fine. Like it's happened before and it's worked before, but it shouldn't be happening to the detriment of one of your top stars. Like, it just doesn't make any sense.
He was the title holder, Yeah. He was so you're not talking about. It's the mic. Not that I want to bury Ricochet, but if he's doing it to Ricochet, well, you're not doing much with Ricochet, but you're burying Miz, who is your penultimate title holder.
Yeah. And fair, maybe, they felt comfortable with having Miz in the ring with Bad Bunny, like felt safe with him if he's trained with him. Yeah, fine. But the outcome is just, what the hell is going on? But I suppose the argument would be, who cares? Come back and he's over. So what does it matter?
And I think it's okay to say that there's not necessarily a tension between saying, hey, Bad Bunny did a good job. It's a decent in-ring performance. And of course, he's going to have brought more people to watching the show, and still be on the viewpoint that, but I don't want to see it on the show. I don't think those two things exist in too much tension. I think it's okay. But for me, it's just not what I want from wrestling, really.
Yeah.
And what you can do with Miz and Morrison now.
Yeah. Well, won't matter. They'll just come back. There'll be another Miz TV, cut some goofy promos. It will be forgotten.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it works for Miz. His role really does quite fit quite well. But Morrison, with all the talent and the skills he's got, he's just playing second fiddle or third or fourth fiddle, really. It's just not where you want him in the cards.
Yeah. Well, Maurice was on Raw, so that kind of glammed things up somewhat.
Where's Bad Bunny though? Was he on Raw? Because he picked up the win, and that was the problem with Raw, wasn't it? All the people that picked up the win weren't on Raw,
or lost in the case of
got
beaten up in the case of Rhea Ripley. But we'll get to that. Right, main event on night one: Bianca Bel-Air defeated Sasha Banks for the women's SmackDown title. It's 17 minutes and 15 seconds, and I broke a rule and watched this twice. I watched it. I read some reviews, saw what was going on Twitter, and on that basis, went back and watched it again.
And what did you think first time, and what did you think second time.
Not too much difference between the two. I think the match is probably marginally better than I initially gave it credit for. And I put that down to a little bit of wrestling fatigue.
Yeah. On your part or their part?
On my part. Just watching so many matches back to back, you just sort of lose the edge a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
The second time around, I watched it in isolation from any other wrestling. And it stood out a lot more, that the narrative of the storyline and the way they were selling some of the moves is actually pretty good.
Yeah,
it is actually pretty good. I still struggle to agree with some of the reviews online from high-speaking journalists in the industry saying that this is one of the best WrestleMania matches ever.
Yeah, so lots of people were saying that was one of the all-time performances, and a few people, Alex McCarthy, TalkSport, was saying it was comfortably within the top 5 WrestleMania main events of all time. Now, I don't know if he had wrestling fatigue or too much coffee or what, but when you just think through that statement, you can pretty quickly put together a whole host of matches that are certainly in that conversation, easily 10 straight away. So it actually works against the match. If you start hyperbolizing to that extent, it actually undermines the quality of the match. And I thought it was maybe the best match on the card. For me, probably the second best match on the card. But to say it's top 5 of all time easily, comfortably, you're actually doing a disservice to them.
Yeah. And look, if you get to the match itself, the build was good. Bianca Bel-Air has been on the rise. She won the Rumble. Sasha Banks, one of the most over female stars of the last 10 years. Michael Cole described her as possibly the best of all time. He didn't clarify that statement in any way.
That possibly is doing a lot of work there.
Yeah. But the match itself, the facials at the start, and you could see how they really recognized the enormity of the event. 2 black females headlining WrestleMania, it was a big deal. And for that, the match is elevated by definition.
Yeah, we're in sports entertainment, aren't we? So the context matters. Just the same as a goal in the Champions League final, Gareth Bale's overhead kick for a few years ago. If you don't like football, you don't know what I'm talking about. But anyway, the context matters. And the context of a WrestleMania main event between 2 black females who are there on merit in a year where Black Lives Matter has been a huge source of controversy and significance. That you can't divorce the two, and you wouldn't want to. That's the sports entertainment collision.
Yeah, and let's be honest, they actually did deliver in the ring. Once they sort of composed themselves, pulled the match together, they near on delivered pretty much everything in the ring. The result was the right one, and the emotion at the end was fantastic. And in a nutshell, that's why you love wrestling. Yeah.
I thought the result was the right one. If they do things rightly here, then they've made a new star, or they've elevated a new star. Again, I saw some people online saying, that's it then, that's the end of the 4 horsewomen leading shows. It's time for the new generation. I don't think that's true at all. But I do think you can add Bel-Air to the mix in a way that you couldn't with others they've tried to elevate, like, say, Carmella. I thought she also had a lot of offense in that match. I thought it was mostly Bianca Belair who was leading that match. She dropped in a stalling suplex, a standing shooting star, face first buster, 450 splash, double power bomb. Like, she was on the offense, and Sasha was there selling, making her a star. There were some callbacks as well to when a previous match Belair had where she'd gone for the double power bomb and not got the pin, which again they played on here for those that are really, really thinking and delving into the sort of annexes of time. I thought there was a few awkward moments, if I'm honest, where they didn't quite get to grips with what they were doing, just from a sort of wrestling technique point of view. But to be honest, they got a big ovation at the beginning, a big ovation at the end. Belair's in tears at the beginning and Sasha's feeling it. Sasha at the end and Belair are both in tears, and Sasha's selling, really, really good match and a really nice way to end the show. but because people are saying it's the best of all time or easily the best of all time, that ends up being a part of the conversation taken away from what actually is just a really good match that ended WrestleMania on night one.
Yeah. Just to pick up on a couple of points there, the suplex where Bel-Air almost dropped Banks after she bounced her off the ropes twice. You can see she pretty much had dropped her, so you had to cut short whatever she had planned. And the Hurricane Run off the top rope, I think you were referencing there.
Yeah, and also I'd include the frog splash that looked like it was going to be a meteora, and then Banks in midair changes to frog splash. But also, you do need a bit of that staccato in wrestling. It can't all be like a ballroom dance. That top rope stuff, I think that's something that's crept into wrestling in the last month or so, 6 weeks or so. There seems to be a lot of people using the top rope to part of moves now. I saw it was on the NXT. I can't remember which wrestler was doing it, but I think a couple were in the tag team, and then it was again on the main roster on WrestleMania. Across a couple of the matches, they were using the top rope to bounce people around, and I saw it again on AEW Dynamite. I think that's something that's been innovated into wrestling in the last few months. Maybe I haven't seen much of it before.
I must admit, it's the first time I'd seen it.
Yeah, and it's suddenly come to fruition an awful lot. I saw it in NXT and thought, oh, this NXT, I've never seen that before. And I saw it 3 times across WrestleMania and in AEW, but that's really good. You know, you think how long wrestling's been going, and suddenly there's people are incorporating this into their moveset. Yeah, really good. And really good to see in a main event innovation.
Yeah, and look, I like the finish, the hair whip across the rib cage into the KOD, and obviously the crowd have popped, and we've all enjoyed the finish, and we all go home on night one having enjoyed ourselves.
Unless, of course, you weren't there, so you're in your home watching it. But yeah,
cup of tea, biscuit, went to bed.
Yeah.
All right, time to move on.
What would you? Well, just before you do, how would you then sum up night one?
Retrospectively speaking, better than night two. Yeah,
definitely.
I enjoyed.
I tell you what, if you'd have said that after night one, that would have been fantastic premonition.
Yeah. I had goosebumps when I saw all the fans back in, and you saw it was WrestleMania, and the set was different. We weren't in the Thunderdome. You know, the anticipation to watch a wrestling show that just hasn't been there for over a year, really since the Rumble in the start of 2020.
Yeah.
So all of that made the spectacle worthwhile, and on most counts, they delivered. Yeah.
I think you could split the card in half, not quite half, but 3 and 4, and I think 3 matches really delivered and felt WrestleMania worthy, and I think 4 matches probably, you like, give or take, probably cut them, but 3 matches definitely felt WrestleMania worthy.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, we've caught up with independent wrestling journalist Tom Colohue and on a pre-recorded interview. Really interesting to get his thoughts. Of course, we've had him on before on episode 8, if you want to go back and check that out. But let's cut to that now. Tom Colohue of PW Torch, welcome back to Wrestling Rebooked. How you doing?
Doing pretty good, thanks. It's a lazy Sunday over here, so I can just chill out and do whatever the hell I want. What can I say?
Better place to be than with Andeve and I. It's good to have you back on. Episode 8 were you here before, and 16 now, so a nice synergy. Just why don't you open things up and tell us what you thought of WrestleMania? It's gone down the last week.
Well, I thought WrestleMania was one of the better ones. I wouldn't necessarily say it's a world beater. I wouldn't necessarily say it matches up to the 2 currently on the posters behind Andeve. But when it comes to the show that we had, I felt the 2-night format really helped it. I felt the first night possibly better, but they bookended the matches really well on the first night. Best matches of night 1 was Drew McIntyre and Bobby Lashley, and of course Sasha Banks and Bianca Belair, first and finish. So you kind of ignore things like Shane McMahon in a wrestling match. You kind of just ignore stuff like that, the negatives. And really looking at it all, I'd probably give it like a 7.5 out of 10. For me, like a 3/4 show, as it were. I was a bit let down by the finish to The Fiend versus Orton, but when it comes to The Fiend, aren't we all a bit let down by the finish to literally everything they do? But thankfully, the main event was an incredible match that more than made up for it. So for me, I rank it very highly, but I don't think I'll be watching it too many times again.
Going forward, Tom, do you think that this 2-night format is here to stay? Or do you think that next year, post-COVID, fans in stadiums, WWE will revert back to the one-night show?
I think it will be here to stay. I know that we're seeing reports at the minute that it's going to be going back to one night, but a year ago, we were also hearing reports that it was going back to one night, and here we are with 2. I think it comes down to really the priority of the WWE, and the priority of the WWE is not to entertain fans. It's not to provide quality programming and entertainment, it's to make Vince McMahon money. That's the point of WWE. If they have 2 nights, they can have 5-6 hour nights, and I'm sure they will when it comes to fans being back full time, and they can sell 2 lots of tickets for it. For me, it's really that simple. If they can make 2 lots of sponsorship money by having those 2 nights, they will. They've got the roster for it. They don't need to provide the greatest quality wrestling ever. It's been a long time since they've really done that compared to other competitions. But for me, I prefer 2 nights, but I worry with fans back whether we're going to end up with an 18-hour WrestleMania because it's WWE, and that's kind of what they do.
On that basis, though, if the principle is make Vince money, why don't they start doing that with other shows, SummerSlam, Royal Rumble, etc.? Well, they can just fill it out. Fans will turn up. They've got, as you say, a deep enough roster.
Well, over the years, it's generally been decided by WWE that sponsorship is more valuable than ticket sales, largely because when it comes to ticket sales, they can't guarantee that ticket the next time, whereas with sponsorship, a good working relationship goes a long way. So this is why, before the pandemic, we saw SummerSlam stretch out to, with a kickoff show, 6 hours or longer. We were seeing the Royal Rumble stretch out to 6 hours or longer. They are doing that. They are making it more appealing to sponsors by simply making it longer. So while we're talking about this being 2 nights and why aren't they stretching it out, I think they were doing that. But when the pandemic era started, they made it a lot more compact to essentially say to people, look, please don't go anywhere. That was what I was feeling when I first saw the changes there. And we also had overflow pay-per-views, such as Payback, which happened a week after SummerSlam. SummerSlam was 2 nights, they were just a week apart.
That's a really interesting take you have there. And it sort of links back to what you were saying last time out about WWE wants you to follow a wrestler or a show or a storyline, whereas we might be a bit old-fashioned and want to watch a show from start to finish, top to bottom, and we want to see a decent 6-hour, 4-hour, whatever it is, wrestling show, which maybe is a little bit more where NXT is these days. What WWE wants to do is go, can we get some eyes on the product? Can you drop in for a little bit? If it's Lashley Lana, if it's Bad Bunny, if it's The Fiend, whatever it is, if it gets your eyes on the product, we're fine with that, and we're not interested in 5-star match after 5-star match.
That's absolutely correct. You look at what The Miz has been doing for the last year or so. He, for me, appeals to a much younger audience than me personally. In previous years, he hasn't. In previous years, he's been that sort of CM Punk Deadpool style talking to the camera character, and that worked for those storylines. But recently, he's been making the jokes with the dirt sheets and John Morrison that are clearly aimed at a younger audience. You saw Baron Corbin and Roman Reigns, and they were throwing dog food at each other. They work for certain different areas. I've spoken to Triple H about this after NXT UK TakeOver Blackpool last year, literally asking about the variety they try and offer. And it really is simply a case of trying to appeal to lots of different people at once. This is why I feel AEW Dynamite has the advantage in certain demographics, because they appeal solely to those demographics, whereas WWE do try to be more broad.
And then I just got one final thing, I guess, off the back of what you were saying there, and Spoiler was talking about it in a sort of prior recording, that you look at WrestleMania now and it's a show, it's a brand. It's not just about 6 matches on the card wrestling, but you can go and get your fireworks, your live band, see a little bit of gymnastics, athleticism, some big bumps from, Shane off the cage or whatever. And that's really how WrestleMania, that fits with what you're saying, that narrative you're saying there, because that's how WrestleMania is now pitched, organized, and delivered.
I would agree. For me, WrestleMania, for the entirety of it, was a commercial, was an advertisement. If you tune into wrestling, this is what you'll get, because you look at Mr. T, Cyndi Lauper, Donald Trump, Arnold Schwarzenegger, so many people. William Shatner was there briefly. They bring in celebrities for these, Mike Tyson, Bad Bunny, Logan Paul. For me, I think this year's WrestleMania was very clever with celebrity. They were subtle with Logan Paul. He just got a stunner and basically reacted to a few things, whereas Bad Bunny was a lot more involved because they could trust him to do that, and I think he delivered. But of years past, WWE predictions when it comes to WrestleMania should never be anything close to your predictions for any other show, because other shows serve storylines. This show, they just try and get it out to the most audience possible, and it's just an advertisement. If you tune in, this is what you will see. This is the best of what we do. You should keep watching, because WrestleMania is the beginning of a new season. The years don't work the same way they do for us in wrestling. Beginning of WrestleMania is the beginning of a brand new season.
But in some ways that works, though, doesn't it? We've been subject to this sort of abhorrent Thunderdome for the last year or so, having to tolerate that, just the same image and the same screen over and over again. At least with WrestleMania, the spectacle and the image of that massive stadium was at least refreshing to see.
Absolutely, definitely. And the spectacle that they create is one of the reasons that I don't think WWE, I should say, can be defeated anytime soon by any other promotion. Because if anyone who doesn't watch wrestling thinks about wrestling, WrestleMania, Hulk Hogan, The Rock. That's basically it. I'm constantly asked, does The Undertaker still wrestle? Kind of. We're never entirely sure. But if you go to a non-wrestling fan, WrestleMania is it. So if someone on Peacock just is wandering through the listings and they see WrestleMania, even if they've never watched wrestling, chances are they're clicking on it.
So what are your thoughts on the latest Peacock move for WWE in terms of potential change of directions and how they book shows, how they sell tickets, how they come up with creative? Think it's going to be positive in the long run?
I think it'll be positive in the long run because it will get more eyes on the product. But at the same time, the more eyes they have on the product, the more lazy that WWE can be at times. So I'm not entirely sure whether it'll be an outright positive for hardcore wrestling fans. With the Peacock deal, the aim is not to bring in the hardcore. So the WWE Network was always aimed at hardcore WWE fans, because why would you sign up if you weren't already invested in the WWE product? You see this with news sites, where essentially you will only sign up to a news site if you already believe the news that they are publishing. You see this in wrestling. You would only sign up if you're already invested. That's why NXT was so successful, because it only had a captive audience. The audience has already decided that NXT is worth signing up for before they can actually have access and watch it. When it comes to the change now, they have gone to a more casual fan base, and the fan base has changed. There is a lot more negativity around NXT now than it was when it was in-house. For me, Peacock deal is exactly the same. They're exposing WWE to a wider audience who watches less wrestling. So while you'll still have all the hardcore audience, you now have to appeal to the casuals even more than you were previously. Now, previously, that's why we saw so many legends return. That's why we saw Goldberg come back. That's why you see John Cena constantly involved. That's why Undertaker is constantly getting the phone call from Vince McMahon. Hey, Mark, I know you retired like 14 years ago. Do you want to come wrestle Goldberg? It's why Hulk Hogan was the host. We'll see a lot more of that on Peacock. And for me, that's why Hulk Hogan was the host of WrestleMania, despite barely being used and despite never being worth using.
That's really interesting, because we talked about Hulk Hogan and the negative effect he actually had on being present. If you just break it down, Tom, for our sort of UK followers, because at the moment I've got the WWE Network. Nothing's changed for me. I still log in, watch few interviews, whatever. So how is that different now that the WWE has gone to Peacock in the States? What's the change there?
Using the UK as an example, there's a really easy example to make. In the UK, there was a move from Sky Sports to BT Sport, which guaranteed more viewership, and BT Sport got a lot more interviews than Sky Sports did, and were just a lot more invested in the product. At the same time, Drew McIntyre started getting pushed to the WWE Championship. At exactly the same time, the decision was made to push a British superstar towards the top level. That is an immediate impact that came from a new deal and the desire to work more with the British audience, work more and appeal to them more. Now, admittedly, there were some plans earlier on to have Drew McIntyre win King of the Ring if he hadn't been injured. He was going to get pushed, but there's definitely a correlation there as regards BT Sport getting the deal and a British superstar being pushed. When it comes to the lack of WWE Network now in the US and the move to Peacock, we're not going to see something similar as regards American superstars pushed more, because that's just WWE. American superstars are pushed more in an American company, as you would expect. At the same time, though, that change towards casual viewers means that there is going to be a lot less focus on what is and a lot more focus on what was. This is why they're going to do a lot of legacy marketing, which is why we're seeing Cesaro's airplane spin in UFO being mentioned as the best thing that ever happened. They are essentially saying, if you didn't watch WrestleMania, here, we're going to see more of that, more recaps. The WWE is already in a position whereby they sort of assume you haven't watched for the last month or so, which is why you get recaps of week upon week upon week. If you weren't watching last week, because it's true. Casual viewers do not watch week in, week out. They might just watch Raw or just watch SmackDown. They might just watch NXT as it was at the minute.
And to be honest, Tom, that's the same. Sorry to interrupt. For hardcore fans, I actually don't watch week in, week out on Raw because I can't stomach it. So it suits me as well. Sorry to interrupt. Like that, it does both graphics.
No, that's absolutely fine. And this is what I mean. We're already seeing changes because they've already built towards it with Fox and the like there, using different demographics, working towards different bases and making a show less about what you want and more about 15 minutes of what you want and 2 hours about what someone else might want. Not everything's aimed at you, and that's fine. But if not enough is aimed at you, you're not going to watch.
So essentially saying then that WWE is tailoring their product to build or to catch more casual fans, as opposed to AEW, which even if they are doing that, the figures don't reflect that.
Absolutely correct. AEW, the fan base that they have, almost religiously watches week in, week out. They are new, they are fresh, they are aimed at a certain amount of people, a certain demographic, as it were, and they brought in names that support that. One of the reasons I think Samoa Joe might be joining AEW makes the most sense to me, but maybe after a G1.
So what? I forgot the question I was going to ask, so I'll just back away.
But that AEW audience is, if they're just going to cater to that, like, do you think it's going to be sustainable for the long term?
I wouldn't necessarily say so, because ultimately the demographic that they are aiming for is going to grow with the product, and then they're still going to be aiming for that demographic and sort of lose that fan base. For a UK reference, younger viewers tend to, younger people tend to be more politically to the left, and older people tend to be more politically to the right. This is very, very similar. In this particular version, AEW is the left and WWE is the right, just looking at the age and the demographics that they aim for. But AEW are also being a little bit clever, because if you look at the celebrities they're aiming for, they're not aiming for the younger demographic with their celebrities. Shaq, Mike Tyson, not a chance. That's bringing in older viewers and aiming sort of for the older but still casual fan base. Whereas WWE, Bad Bunny, Logan Paul, they're aiming for a younger casual. There is a lot of nuance in this as to what they're aiming for, but the more time you spend in marketing, the more you realize demographics don't mean much until you look at what you're marketing for. If AEW was marketing for 70 plus and getting 20 to 30, they'd be failing even if they were the best at 20 to 30. That's something you have to consider as well.
So speaking, and this is the question that's come back to me, but it also fits perfectly with what you're saying there. Speaking of sort of the demographics and the marketing and the competition or not between WWE and AEW, what do you think the thinking was behind Jericho and Stone Cold on his podcast? Because in theory, aren't they rivals? Aren't they opponents? Doesn't that cross the divide in a way that's not helpful to either? Or is it helpful to both? Does Vince not care about AEW? Does AEW see it as a positive? What's your take on that occurrence?
WWE and AEW both see it as a positive. It's beneficial to one side, but it's also beneficial from a purely PR perspective to the other side. You look at the ratings for AEW, you look at what they've been able to achieve. They are trying to pick up a lapsed WWE audience. Have been very open about this. This is one of the reasons they brought in so many former WWE talent. You look at Jon Moxley, the reincarnation of what Dean Ambrose was apparently supposed to be, but much better presented. If you were a Dean Ambrose fan, you've come over to AEW and you see Jon Moxley and it's something entirely different. They are trying to bring in lapsed fans, and that show on the WWE network will achieve that for them, because people might watch for Chris Jericho. People who are fans of Chris Jericho for the last 20 years will probably tune in, check it out, and think, oh, he's there now. I didn't know that. I'll go and have a look. In marketing, you always assume that you're talking to someone who hasn't seen anything you've done. Meanwhile, for the PR perspective, the WWE will see no financial benefit from this, apart from the fact that everyone's going to tune into the network and tune into Peacock to see that. They have just said to all AEW fans, hi, wrestling's on Peacock now. Check it out if you've got Peacock. But from a PR perspective, what they are saying there is we are not afraid of AEW and we don't punch down. AEW might punch up, but we don't punch down. In fact, much like raids on Twitch, they're trying to help the little guy. They're trying to help people grow. And that's just one of the ways that they are looking at themselves doing this. Whether or not that helps them in the long run, we'll have to see, because AEW can frame it entirely differently. AEW can legacy market the hell out of this and make it them getting one over on WWE, and people will believe that. But in reality, from a WWE perspective, they're just saying, I'm not afraid of you. By all means, try and succeed.
Which brings it full circle to your initial point about WrestleMania being just an advertisement for a show and whatever. Actually, AEW are thinking about what's our demo week to week. WWE's thinking, couldn't care less. If you tune in for 10 minutes or 15 minutes or one pay-per-view a year, as long as you're tuning in, that's good. So what you're sort of saying there is AEW and WWE have different intentions. They come together for this podcast and both are happy because they've got different intentions.
Absolutely. It's an everybody wins situation. Literally everybody in that room, everybody outside of that room working for either company won in that particular moment. You'll get fans arguing, you'll get fans bickering about who won this and who won that. But in reality, everybody won who could win in that particular scenario. The WWE are extremely happy with the response there because ultimately they've made you tune into Peacock. And once you've tuned into Peacock, now you know wrestling's there. They're assuming that everyone who will have tuned in has never seen wrestling on Peacock. Their mission for that entire weekend, get fans onto Peacock. In America, they succeeded. In the UK, they've got people onto the network. They've succeeded. And AEW, meanwhile, got themselves in front of a few more eyes.
That would maybe go some way to explaining why AEW didn't put a rival show on for WrestleMania.
You always see wrestling shows around WrestleMania, usually in the same town. There is nothing more profitable for a small indie federation than WrestleMania. Nothing. Local to me, we've got PCW, who I've been doing some work for recently. They put a show on against NXT UK TakeOver, but it wasn't against. It was before. So you'd watch their show as a warm-up to NXT UK TakeOver. That was why they did that. You see that at WrestleMania weekend. Not everyone can get WrestleMania tickets, but maybe you want to be there for WrestleMania atmosphere. When it came to New Orleans, you could not walk down the street without seeing 15 or 16 different wrestling shows on. What they've got is a concentration of wrestling fans all in one place. And they're just trying to say, hey, you like wrestling? Come here, come watch our show. AEW did put a house show on, but they did not go directly into competition. Ultimately, you can't beat WrestleMania, but you can profit from it.
Yeah. It's like going to a Rolling Stones gig and, by the way, here's Kings of Leon and here's the Arctic Monkeys, and it doesn't really matter because you're just there for the ride.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You have opening acts for comedians, same thing.
Yeah. All right. So on a general point then, where do you kind of see the wrestling industry as a whole now, with the we sort of touched on ratings and the relative sort of decline in WWE and the potential sort of uprising of AEW, maybe even New Japan as well?
The wrestling industry right now is particularly strong. I know that we're seeing the Raw numbers drop and we continue to see that. Honestly, AEW Dynamite is starting to catch up on Raw, and that's something to keep an eye on. But Smackdown is incredibly healthy when it comes to their numbers right now, and they are producing a very good show. Overall, when it comes to all WWE product, there are a ton of viewers, and they're not at all worried about the particular decline. A large part of this is evolution. They've moved on. You look at YouTube, and they sometimes get more views on a YouTube clip than they do on a Raw. They're still making money from that. They're still absolutely fine. And it keeps those casual viewers going. Because if you miss a Raw and you can't catch up, you might not catch up. Whereas if you check on that one superstar you like on YouTube and just watch a 3-minute video, well, you can tune in next week. You'll be absolutely fine. They'll give you a recap anyway, and you're all caught up. They're not worried about that. At the same time, the rise of AEW has been extremely good for the industry. It's got a lot of lapsed fans back, and I don't think all of those lapsed fans have gone immediately to AEW and solely AEW. I think they've actually created viewership for NXT as well, to be completely honest. Just because they've got people back into wrestling, and then NXT competing at the same night, you might flick over the channel during ad break because you still want to see more wrestling, and there it is on the other side. So I think they've created a bit of audience for that as well. Meanwhile, New Japan has now got New Japan Strong that they are working on. And also, for a long time, because of how Japan handled the pandemic, you could watch New Japan when you couldn't really watch anything else with fans. New Japan had fans for the G1, and they were spaced out 50% as it were, but they had fans and it felt like wrestling. Whereas you go to WWE and you're in the Thunderdome, you go to AEW and you've got a very sparse crowd. Little things like that go a long way. Now, admittedly, we've seen the branding of the Forbidden Door, which always makes me laugh because there is no Forbidden Door. AEW have just told you there is, and you believe it. That's damn good marketing. Damn good marketing. There was never a Forbidden Door. It's just that New Japan didn't want to work with Impact because of how they handled Kazuchika Okada. That was the only problem. We saw the AEW Championship on a Wrestle Kingdom before any mention of a Forbidden Door. And here we are, a deal was made. We've also seen this previously when a WCW and a WWE talent came together to wrestle in ECW. I believe it was Taz and Mike Awesome. Way back when.
That's right. Yeah.
Way back when, 99, 2000, something like that. And you look at things like that, and you see that the interconnection is actually hugely beneficial pretty much for everyone. It's just that certain big companies don't want to work together, not because of any dislike of the other company. Look at the Chris Jericho interview with Steve Austin, because not everybody wins when you do. If we did a super show now of WWE versus AEW, surely the more popular wrestlers have to win, but then people are going to be annoyed because it's WWE. It is WWE. They are the more popular show. They simply are. So if you put Roman Reigns against Kenny Omega, Roman Reigns kind of has to win. But then what does that make AEW look like? It's much better for AEW and Impact to work together because people are more likely to forgive a dodgy finish. When it comes to WWE, because of their success, they have a lot less benefit of the doubt. You find this in sport all the time. Manchester United are the most successful club in the English Premier League, and people hate them for that. I'm one of those people. I hate them for that. So it's something like that. The big guy is always the one who's hated the most. That's simply how it works. When it comes to AEW, Impact, New Japan, they can work together. They can weave together. They can tell really good stories. A large part of that is New Japan is working with AEW. Their focus is on different continents. They want to bring viewers from their continent to their show. Impact, meanwhile, just needed the leg up in my eyes.
So do you think this will work out for the long term? Yeah, with the storylines in AEW at the moment with Gallows and Anderson and the various Japanese talent that have come across on the female side?
I think so, but we have to look at the possibility that Impact is really struggling right now. My opinion long-term was that AEW wouldn't be immediately attacking WWE. I felt that Impact would be at the most risk from AEW because you're losing the ability to sign so many of the talent who've already gone to AEW. Impact can't sign those people. You look at Matt Hardy doing great things over in AEW. He was doing those things in Impact and now he's not. The viewership will be entirely different. And you look at the ratings when AEW features on Impact compared to when AEW does not feature, it's telling a big story. AEW, I think its success will damage other promotions, but they're promotions we don't see featured too prominently. They're small indie promotions who can't book certain talent. There's a struggle there. There is a struggle. But with more people being released from WWE, that should hopefully help Impact out if Impact can get any of them. That's the question for me. Can Impact get any of those people to help them swell their roster and bring in new, fresh talent? It's important to have different promotions and sort of have people working in different ones. WCW, WWF back in the day were constantly swapping talent, and it helped keep things fresh. If you only watched one show, you'd constantly have new people coming in. Road Dogg tells a story of being backstage in WCW trying to get a job and then seeing Shane McMahon walk past. So he just left because he'd just been fired from WWF. This sort of thing did happen all the time, but WWE lately have been hoarding talent, have just been making sure nobody can go anywhere else. They are now past that. They have stopped being worried about AEW. Now we're seeing people released. And I think it's good for the entire wrestling industry to have talent available to re-swell the numbers at places like Impact, which are struggling to fill the roster and to fill viewership at the minute.
Specifically on Samoa Joe, though, you don't think he had a place in WWE?
I definitely think he had a place in WWE, but last I heard on Samoa Joe, he wasn't cleared. When it comes to concussion-related injuries, the WWE take no risks because of, I'm just going to say name redacted. That's what I tend to call him, but you know what I mean. You know exactly who I mean. That one person where the WWE suddenly went, maybe we shouldn't hit people in the head with chairs anymore. When it comes to Impact, when it comes to AEW, when it comes to New Japan, their doctors will clear him.
Yeah, interesting. It's, he was actually doing a great job on the commentary there, wasn't he? Like, regardless.
Agreed, but I think it's very much a case that maybe that's not where he wanted to be.
Yeah.
The WWE, when they're creating the list of people to release, the board, the finance department come together and do cost value assessments. Who are we spending more on than they are making for us? That's why people like Kurt Angle went a year ago. That's why people like Mojo Rawley went this year, because they look at them and think they're not creating the value. Whereas Titus O'Neil, who never wrestles, his ambassadorial work is creating so much benefit for the WWE, they will never let him go. They also then add on people who have wanted to leave and have publicly said they want to leave. That's why Rusev went last year. Because despite being in a really prominent storyline that was getting huge airtime on YouTube at least, they have some of those clips from that storyline getting 8 or 10 million views. He didn't want to stay. Yeah. He simply didn't want to stay. So they add that to the list, and that's how we end up with the list that we have.
And just lastly on the releases there, your thoughts on the Iconics being broken up over as a tag team and then let go?
So when the releases happened, I immediately jumped on Twitch on a live show to try and talk out what I knew and share with people the frustration that we have. I actually, on Twitch, we do a lot of stupid things. I have channel points set up where I cut promos on Vince McMahon. I was asked to do one on the Iconics. It's on Twitter, which I suggest people check out, because my frustration in that moment is a lot stronger than my frustration right now. The way I see it, looking at the cost value analysis, they still had a lot more to give. Looking at the people they still have, who maybe they haven't used, Santana Garrett, for example, clearly the Iconics were earning quite a bit more. But my opinion there is that the Iconics were hired and used to promote their workings in Australia. The first Super Showdown took place in Australia. Now they've got Rhea Ripley as a champion. I think they've decided they have enough Australia, essentially. Exactly. We talked earlier on about Drew McIntyre getting a push when BT Sport got the deal. Maybe Australia's not giving them what they want. Jinder Mahal got the push when they were looking at India TV deals. Now it looks like they've decided they don't need the Iconics anymore. And I think that is ridiculous, because you broke up one of your best women's tag teams, who actually were a tag team, who actually worked together, who actually came down to the same music at a time when you needed women's tag teams, at a time when you had the tag team turmoil. If you had paired up Carmella and Bayley in that tag team turmoil and then paired up the Iconics again, the pop you would have got at WrestleMania would have been incredible. You could have done so much with them. This was a crime of your own making, is what I would say to WWE as regards that. You've broken up a tag team, then got rid of them. You also look at Zack Ryder and Mojo Rawley. Broke them up, did nothing with them afterwards. They were gone. It's very clear to a lot of people that certain people really don't like tag team wrestling, especially when you consider that Billie Kay, even as a singles competitor, was one of the most entertaining aspects of a Smackdown that was doing record numbers, at least for current years. They were right back on that path. They were earning rave reviews. Billie Kay was getting huge traction on social media. WWE pay attention to that. They just decided it wasn't worth it.
Yeah, shame. I quite enjoyed them. All right, well, let's switch tack slightly here then, Tom. I just wanted to get your thoughts on the British wrestling scene at the moment. Obviously, it's been through a tough time in the last few years. Pandemic hasn't helped that. What are your thoughts going forward? Do you think you can make a comeback of sorts and get back to sort of where we were a few years ago?
I absolutely do. I think when it comes to Brit wrestlers, there is a lot of doom at the moment going out there. A lot of naysay, a lot of the idea that Brit Wrestling is dead, and it's simply not the case. NXT UK did come in and take a lot of British talent with it. However, the idea that there's no British talent left is absolutely ridiculous. There is so much talent at every level. I follow a lot of different wrestlers, as you'd imagine, a lot of British wrestlers that I've gotten to know over the years at different levels of their careers. I work with PCW at the moment, Pro Championship Wrestling, originally Preston City Wrestling out of Preston, and working with their YouTube channel. And there's also Rev Pro. There's also so many different companies that are waiting on the moment to come back. And they'll come back big. They are focused on delivering what were looking for, because as soon as crowds can come back, they will do. And that's an advantage that we have in the UK, because the vaccination that we have is going a lot faster than in other countries. It's the one thing we've done right about the whole pandemic so far, but we finally did something right. So we'll have crowds back. PCW is coming back in July. They're also looking at coming back in June as part of an arts festival. So they've got some funding from an arts council to put on an open air show in Preston, where anyone can just come down and check it out at the square in the middle of Preston town, as it were. When it comes to Brit Rest is Dead, that makes no sense to me, because I know the talent that are not just eager, but they are chomping at the bit for the opportunity to get back involved. I see wrestlers like Hannah Taylor. If you don't know her, she's someone definitely to follow. Sheikh El Sham, Joey Hayes, Lucia Lee, people who have constantly been there waiting for the moment. Maria May, so many people who are just eager to get back in their wrestling gear and start putting on shows again. Brit Rest is going nowhere. And all else fails, we are currently working with Independent Wrestling On Demand. So we've got an on-demand service that will give you wrestling from all over the place that funds Brit Rest. So supporting that will help fund a lot of British wrestling too. So we're working on different ways to try and keep British wrestling going during a very tough time. But I'm as involved as I can in trying to make this work. And I see so many really passionate, enthusiastic people. That is all you need to make a damn good start.
So your take is that it's been obviously dormant during COVID, but it remains dormant rather than dead, because certainly we went to a Rev Pro show shortly before the pandemic, and Ospreay was there winning a title. It was absolutely fantastic, packed. The quality of wrestling was fantastic. You know, you sort of turn up at these events and think you're going to see maybe a school gym style, you know, low key, but it's far removed from that. The standard is fantastic, but obviously we're now 15 months worth of COVID. You've had these wrestlers' incomes and sort of futures stalled. You've had the companies themselves, Rev Pro, Progress, and PwC, obviously as well, not being able to put on shows and make money. But you're very clear that it's just been a dormant sort of setback rather than a fatal blow.
The way I see it, British wrestling has been in hibernation. Once the pandemic's over, we'll be poking it with a stick and it'll wake straight up. Because that's the thing. Brit Rest was never dead. Brit Rest was impacted by NXT UK and the impact that it had there. But at the same time, that just made room. That just made room for more talent. There are so many people thrilled at the idea of just getting back in the ring. You'll see so many debuts. You'll see so much more ready to go, because everyone's been spinning their wheels, waiting for that chance to get back in those rings. Wherever we see wrestling grab a load of more talent, all that means is that more talent are coming up. And throughout all of this, I can only speak for PCW on this one. Wrestling academies, some of them have struggled, some of them have closed, but some of them have just taken the opportunity to formalize what they're doing. You look at what's happening in the UK Parliament at the minute, viewing wrestling more as a sport. That means we're going to see more oversight in these academies. For me, that means those academies are going to be massively improved.
That you're referring to a little bit the off the back of the speaking out movement and the parliamentary review and commissions, where they're just tightening up a bit of the legislation and formulating some things more officially and putting some more regulation into probably what was an industry that developed very quickly and got away from where it was before people realized what was happening.
Yeah, that's basically what I'm referring to there. The parliamentary group who was set up in the wake of the speaking out movement to make improvements, and in some cases to force improvements, which is absolutely what should have been happening from day one. I have been to wrestling shows that don't have any medical staff. I have been to wrestling shows that don't have a female changing room. This is not acceptable. For the longest time, I looked at the opportunity of unionization, but that sort of fell apart when the strongest voice for it was, of course, implicated in the speaking out movement.
Yeah,
I would still like to see a wrestling union. And one of the reasons I firmly believe in that, I'm a unionist by design, as it were. Anyway, I'm a trade unionist. I've been working with PCS for years upon years. But the way I see it, unions will become the commonplace when someone becomes so big that the WWE hires them regardless of their union affiliation. What I think we need to see throughout wrestling is the ability to bring unions into contract negotiations, to bring lawyers, solicitors, whatever it may be. Because the amount of people in WWE that think they have ironclad contracts and then get a phone call saying, oh, by the way, you're fired and you can't wrestle for 90 days. The amount of people across the board who have that. Wrestlers need to know that they have rights. And the only way we can give them those rights is by guaranteeing that they're not going to lose jobs because of it. By guaranteeing that people aren't going to be trading stories of, oh, I hate working with this person, you shouldn't hire them, simply because they asked for equal rights or the ability to actually perform. Oversight is not just necessary, it is required. We need people checking these things. We need to reward the companies that are doing it right, and we need to punish the companies that are doing it wrong. Speaking out is something I'm very glad happened. Very glad happened. And I hope it continues to happen, because the problems are still there. And anytime you take your eye off that ball, I promise you, you're about to find out something else.
Lots of parallels there with the sort of Uber, Deliveroo style issues, where you have a new company sets itself up, does incredibly well, and then suddenly it loops back around. Hold on, what about the people that are the nuts and bolts, the essentials, the cornerstones of what's happening? And we've seen that with Uber, Deliveroo, those sort of things. And I guess that's what we're seeing with wrestling, hopefully, in Britain.
Yeah, it's a case of too good to be true. When something is that successful that fast, look at the corners it's cutting, because it will be. Now, there are some companies that have arrived and performed and created in that way, but they won't be afraid to have you check on them because they'll know they're doing it right. Look for a code of conduct on a wrestling site. Like pick a company, go to their website, look for a code of conduct. If it's not there, I have questions, and so should everybody else.
Playing devil's advocate, though, a lot of in my experience of working with some of the independent wrestlers, they do like the flexibility of being freelance, being able to work for one company and go to another rather than being tied down contractually, especially if they have part-time jobs or even full-time jobs.
When I'm talking contracts, I'm purely talking like WWE level. I know in the UK scene particularly, being a freelancer is not just rewarded, it's required as well. You have to be able to go and work on different shows to actually make a living. I just want to be able to say fully and certainly that every show they work at delivers the same quality of care to the wrestlers.
Yeah. Well, let's hope that's reflected in the actual products going forward, and as fans, that we can get back to seeing some shows soon enough. Just lastly on that, what do you think to some of the shows that have been broadcast without fans? Do you think that that's something that will continue or has been in any way successful?
I think that's something that might continue. It depends how they go about it. If I'm talking to a wrestling company and saying maybe you should do live content, in that regard, maybe the best idea for live content is to do it without fans. Because then, let's say you've got a large wrestling YouTube and you've only just started looking at wrestling shows. Something like Tap Out Wrestling, for example, they're pretty big on YouTube at the minute. If they sponsored a wrestling show so they could broadcast it live, it costs a lot less when there's no fans because you don't have to worry about security or anything like that. You can edit the video to make sure it's the best possible product, edit out botches, anything like that. And you can actually, when it comes to live stuff, you can change your camera angles as you're going. You can literally just have a a stream deck, and just pick your angles, pick your stuff like that, put commentary over it. You can put your graphics on, whatever you want. You can make high quality stuff. I think we'll see a lot less of them, but I think we'll see them based on the country of origin as well, because a lot of countries at the moment aren't quite ready to come back to wrestling, but they still want to put on wrestling shows.
All right. Well, unless Andeve's bursting to ask any further questions, I think we'll wrap up there, shall we? Tom, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on.
Thank you.
And coming back. Hopefully you'll come back again soon.
Anytime, yeah.
Where can we find you, watch you currently online?
You can find me on Twitter at Colohue, that is Colohue, exactly how you spell my surname. But most of my focus at the minute is going into my Twitch channel, which is twitch.tv/Tom Colohue. I do wrestling content Mondays and Fridays and pay-per-views for watch-alongs of Raw and Smackdown. And I also do some gaming content at the moment. It's Football Manager on Tuesdays, Final Fantasy VII Remake on Thursdays, and occasionally I do a lazy Sunday stream of Fall Guys as well.
He's got the full plugs in. Tom, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Episode 16 of Wrestling Rebooked, putting wrestling to submission, and on to section 3, where we're going to review night 2 of WrestleMania 37. There's a lot of numbers there. 13th of April, there's another one. So, opening up, we had Titus and Hogan again in a pirate suit this time. Let's just gloss over that. First match was Randy Orton and The Fiend.
The most anticipated match of all time.
So anticipated it went 5 minutes and 50 seconds. The entrance must have been longer than that when you combine it with Alexa Bliss. That was the first note I had for this match. We had long entrances, and then we had the big build up to The Fiend coming out of a box.
They made sure to tell you it was a box as well, didn't they? But very convoluted. There's a square thing at the ring side. It's a box. Just call it a box.
Yeah. Of course, the match was fought under a red light. And I actually noted down we had 21 minutes from the start of the program on the network through to the first bell.
Really, as long as that on the second night as well, right? So you really. Why do they do that with the hosting duties? And I don't know why you should know, but what's the point of that? The host might do some backstage segments or be in the ring to welcome or whatever, but why do they do that stuff with the host? Because it's awful. It's awful.
Yeah.
And that's a reason why you can't have WrestleMania in one night, because you've got all those awful. Get rid of that, and that's 30 minutes gone, and you're into game time anyway.
Yeah.
The match.
We're calling it a match.
Well, it definitely is a match because there's a bell and there's a pin, and unbelievably, but not unbelievably, because it's the Fiend. After everything Randy Orton, who I assume is the heel, but who knows at this point, has done to the Fiend, including setting him on fire. Whatever. Pinned him clean in the ring. Inexplicably. Why? You know what? The match itself, for 4 minutes or whatever it went, was not too bad in terms of them exchanging with each other, like as in whatever. But it's all this bigger paraphernalia and stuff around it. I don't understand. Like you say, it's almost the match almost encapsulates everything that's bad about the Fiend since he turned up and showed so much potential, because he's lost. So he's lost yet again. The storyline that got him here with Alexa Bliss and how it ended is totally. You have to do some amazing gymnastics to try and frame it in any way so that it makes any sort of sense. And then they included the red light and stuff. Dave Meltzer gave this -1, which I don't know what that means, but it's pretty poor. It's a pretty poor match.
I think I threatened to fast forward this match in a previous episode. I did come close, but I did stick around for most of it. Samoa Joe, God rest his soul, said during commentary that some of Orton's offense had no effect. So they obviously were leading down the line of this supernatural power that the Fiend has to not be able to take bumps or whatever, which actually worked for the Undertaker in his early days, maybe. And throughout history where they've gone with these type of things, they have been able to get it over in some way. But this has just gone so far now. It's just utter nonsense.
Well, who? Again, a bit like Bad Bunny and Miz, where you can understand what the aim is. What is the aim of this match? Because is it to set something up between Alexa Bliss and Bray Wyatt, which let's not forget, and I know there's loads of people trying to say, oh, it makes sense, whatever. When she turned up in the swamp match, she was a figment of Braun Strowman's imagination. So anyway, that doesn't even make sense. But then somehow she's turned into, is she now controlling the Fiend? Is she the Fiend? It's just, it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work, and it's embarrassing.
In kayfabe, isn't that what they were going for? So the black stuff that came out of Bliss's mouth was her abducting Sister Abigail's soul, right?
if you say so, but who's Sister Abigail? And like, what's her soul? And how much do you think that Bray Wyatt has to take is culpable for this? I mean, because he obviously wasn't over as Husky Harris. He was really over as Bray Wyatt, the Wyatt family, but for whatever reason, back-to-back WrestleManias, WWE put him against Cena and Undertaker, but they didn't let him go over. Mm. He then turned up as The Fiend, which seemed like a phenomenal character, more excitement and buzz than any character rather than individual, but character for years and years. And then he's just slowly, actually quite rapidly, been destroyed as a character. So does he take any credit for this, or is it all bad booking behind the scenes?
I think it's got to be a bit of both, isn't it? But there's only so many times you can keep coming back from this. So Bray Wyatt has turned up on Raw in the Firefly Funhouse, just cutting another regular promo. So we're now led to believe that he's back.
What, as Bray Wyatt?
Correct.
And the Fiend is what, gone forever?
Who knows?
But the Firefly Funhouse is inherently linked to the character.
Yeah.
And where's Alexa Bliss in that funhouse?
She was in her Alexa's playground.
Oh yeah. I just the narrative doesn't make sense, and the only good thing is Wharton is now out of that feud, so he's available to do something else. Or is he out of that feud? I guess he must be.
Yeah, so he was part of the triple threat for the number one contender on Raw.
Yeah, and he keeps beating him and setting him on fire. So
yeah. The moment you set someone on fire and then try and to bring them back in any form is just too far to suspend belief.
Yeah.
I can't really be bothered to talk about the rest of the match, to be honest.
No, it's not. It's just
so.
And again, just as a caveat for then a later tie-up, that is another match you could rid from the cards.
Absolutely, and the crowd booed at the end.
Yeah. But then suddenly, across the nights already, that's 4 matches that could be gone, and maybe that. You've gone for 2 nights, but there's 4 matches on there that instantly get them off.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, next up, we had the women's tag team title match. Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler, I should say, ended up beating Natalya and Tamina in 14 minutes and 20 seconds. Right, Q&A time.
All right, go on.
So the build to this.
It's the day before, isn't it? So. The build came the night before. I didn't like that build. I don't like the idea that you do night 1 to do night 2. So no, I don't like the build. There was no build really, apart from Tamina Jax a little bit.
Best part of the match?
Baszler hitting a couple of stiff knees.
Worst part of the match?
I mean, the end was pretty poor. The Tamina slam was poor. Sort of camera focus was poor. It was all pretty poor. The match itself was the worst part of the match. That sounds like a Bray Wyatt thing to say.
The result?
Yeah, fine. Keep it on them. Fine.
Any overall thoughts?
Another match that doesn't need to be on WrestleMania. Another match you were told to look at Jackson, Tamina going face off was rubbish, was poor, was underwhelming. Another match where Jax's spots didn't look very good. The only good thing in the tag match, really, I'd rather see Baszler and Natalya go 1-on-1 for a women's title, to be honest. So, no, none of it was really for me.
Summarised nicely.
Same questions back at you then. What do you think of the build?
Well, there was none. So you can't really comment too much on that, other than as soon as that first night is finished, you're going to have a heel versus heel match.
Good point, yeah. What was the worst part of the match?
You see, most people would say the answer to that is the length of the match, but I thought they actually built it nicely. So I'm going to turn a negative into my own positive there. Some of the bumps that Tamina and Nia Jax were taking, I agree with you, were sloppy, shall we say.
All right. What do you think about the result? If the best part was the length?
Yeah. They booked themselves into a corner slightly here because they probably did have to keep those 2 as champions.
Mm-hmm.
But Natty and Tamina, they don't quite work as a tag team.
No,
I think they were trying to present them as a homage to their fathers, and that's sort of their tentative link.
Oh, that's a good shout. That's classic WWE, isn't it? Like, how long did Charlotte have to win stuff and have Ric Flair? Even this year, Ric Flair around in the background. Yeah, that's a fair point. So, what do you think about the result overall?
Yeah.
Sorry, the match overall. Concluding comments.
Which question are you going with there?
That last one, because as a result, you said you had to keep the belt on them. So overall,
by the end of 14 minutes, or whatever it was, I was struggling to care.
right, fair enough.
But it's frustrating that the women's division is at the stage. Sorry, the women's tag division is at the stage that it is.
Yeah, with a shout out to the Iconics who have then been bounced out 2 days later, or whatever it is. Yeah. So you spent a lot of time in the toilet so far, because Fiend Orton was a toilet match, and this was a toilet match. So, and you've had the first half an hour.
I watched all of this.
Oh, okay. Yeah. But I mean, if you're in the stadium, this would be a concierge. Like hit the stands and get some popcorn. Fantastic.
Yeah. Although the match was 14 minutes, I don't know how long your popcorn is. Surely not.
There's long queues, isn't there? There's long queues.
All right. Business did pick up on the next match, though. Kevin Owens defeated Sami Zayn with Logan Paul at ringside. A singles match that was 9 minutes and 20 seconds. What a match we had here.
Yeah, this was, up to this point, I think it was my favourite match. I think it shaded Cesaro Rollins. In fact, I think it was much better than Cesaro Rollins, and I think it was better than Banks Bel-Air. It is just a really good match. Again, no build. Just 2 weeks ago, even at the Elimination Chamber, if they knew this was coming, they could have done it. They were in the same chamber. They could have done a little bit more together. No build. Logan Paul at ringside, and you're thinking this could go terribly wrong. But the two of them together are just excellent, and it was intense from start to finish. They just hit each other. They didn't spend any time rolling around on the floor or playing up on he's injured the knee, so I'm just going to do 100 submissions on his knee. It was bang, like pop-up powerbomb, cannonball, suplex on the apron, Michinoku driver, frog splash, knee driver, exploder suplex, thunderbomb, brainbuster, Owens coming off the top rope with a fisherman's, a haluva kick, super kicks, like bang, 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 bang. It wasn't just kicking out of special moves or anything. They just had a flow, and the match, it didn't ebb and flow. It just flow, bang, 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 match, move. I thought it was a really, really good 10 minutes or so. Was it longer than that?
So you didn't like it then?
No, I hated it. No, it was good. It was good. I mean, it probably helped by the fact that up to now you've had an hour worth of programming. You're thinking this is no good. So probably whatever the opposite of wrestling fatigues is, wrestling thirst. That was what you were getting going into this match.
Wrestling thirst. Part of the reason this is so good is because these two obviously best buds have worked together for many years and probably have a degree of trust with each other that they don't have with others.
Yeah.
That's not to say that they can't work with others, but these two are always going to be able to know how to put on a show and maybe trust each other to take it that extra risk, the bump on the apron, for example. And that just made it what it was. The use of Logan Paul, like again, similar to Bad Bunny, like you're going to have him involved, taking a stunner at the end when all the crowd are begging for it. That's fine. Like they execute that fine.
Yeah, I think you're right about the two of them, the way they're intertwined and their careers are intertwined, and their time in WWE will always be like that. And actually, almost Michael's Triple H-esque, or Benoit Angle, where they're always feuding and not feuding, and it's just an Austin Rock. These two are like that. And actually in WWE today, it feels a bit more segmented. You wrestle and feud with this guy, then you wrestle and it's more conveyor belt, whereas this feels much more like a story and a narrative together. Yeah. Logan Paul, I agree mostly. At the end, the stunner, you sort of knew he was going to get the stunner. He knew he was going to get the stunner. Owens knew he was going to give the stunner. You knew both of them know that. They know you know that, but you're waiting for the payoff. That was fine. What I didn't like was in the match, they cut to him a bit too much. I wanted to watch the move and then I'll react how I want to react. But actually what they did was they showed a move and then they would cut to Logan Paul reacting to that move. I didn't need that. And I don't know why it was necessary. Fair.
Something we mentioned on the first section about the passion and the sort of emotion, the raw emotion coming out. We saw when Owens hit the ring, especially just how pumped up they were.
Yeah. And the ovation from the crowd for Owens hitting the ring was massive.
Yeah. And there's the example of someone that's over. Are you rebooking?
No, I don't think so. I'd love to see them further up the card. A bit like Cesaro Rollins. I'd love to see them further up the card, doing something with a bit more jeopardy. But, I mean, for a match on the undercard, that was superb.
Yeah, agree. All right, next up, we had Sheamus defeat Riddle, bro. 10 minutes, 50 seconds for the US title. Right. I got 30 seconds on my stopwatch here.
Okay.
Hit me.
Sheamus has been doing some really, really good work recently, so I'm glad he was in this match. Riddle is an absolutely fantastic athlete and performer, but his gimmick is absolutely annoying. So you just want him to get beaten up. Sheamus was the man for it. I thought this match, to start with, I wasn't keen on it, but it ended up getting better and better and better. Hard hitting, overhead belly to belly, jackhammers, corkscrews. There's a few botches which took away from it, but the bro kick at the end, I think Adam Cole would have delivered that sort of finisher better, but still decent match. One of the more solid on the undercard.
Not bad. Good going.
All right. Your turn. Hold on. I've got to fiddle around a little bit more here. I've pulled up the calculator rather than the stopwatch. Okay. Time starts now.
I'm pleased Sheamus won this match because he's had some grueling matches and a grueling schedule with McIntyre and some heavy hitting matches on Raw. And this was almost like a payoff to say, hey, here's your big payday, WrestleMania. You're going to win this title. I cannot stand Riddle or his gimmick or any of his kind of character work going on. It's one dimensional. And they're going to want to push Riddle big, and he needs more depth to his character if he's going to get over in the long term. Match itself was fine, very hard hitting. Enjoyed the ending. That
was bang on, just like 30 points something. Yeah, very nice. Good. Yeah.
We are on YouTube.
Fine. That's enough for that match, isn't it? With Crews quite on.
I think so. We've got a big one next. Apollo Crews.
Oh no.
Defeated Big E in a Nigerian drum fight for the Intercontinental title, and it took 6 minutes and 50 seconds.
We're on positives and negatives here.
Give me your positives.
I like the fact that it was I like the fact it was a Nigerian drum match, which was essentially a no DQ with just a sort of Nigerian drums, if that's what they are, around the ring. I'm glad it wasn't more complicated than that. I don't know why they can't just call it a no DQ match, but whatever. I'm actually fine with Apollo winning because I think he's been booked badly, but has lots of potential and just needs that break. There was some good moves in the match as well. Like dropping Apollo on the stairs and a frog splash to the table at the end and a big ending at the end. So, it was better than I expected. The gimmick worked and there were some good moments in it. They're my positives. What are yours?
I can assure you they're not going to take as long as yours. The way they did the finish was a good way to get heat on Apollo Crews, considering Big E was in front of a home crowd and he's over.
Yeah.
So if you want to really get this guy over as a heel, that was the way to do it. A heel that you're really going to dislike. They are amazing athletes. Cons?
Seen this match so many times. Not really keen on the Nigerian push, be it Apollo's accent and his new character, plus the fact it was like it's a Nigerian drum match. What is that? And I didn't like the gentleman who turned up at the end, whose name I now forget, but the commentators going, who is he? But we've seen him on Raw Underground, so we're not stupid.
He's gonna have a different name now.
But okay, fair enough. But they're stupid if they think they're stupid. If they think we're stupid, who is this guy? What the guy that was on Raw Underground? I know they've banished it from their memory, and I wish we had as well. Yeah. But maybe it's no longer canon. That's why they've pied it off. But yeah, so negatives, and more realistically, I just didn't want to see the match.
You done?
Yeah.
Not much to add, to be honest. Was there any explanation of the rules of this match? It was based.
There was, but does the crowd know that? It was said in that you just got to hit each other as hard as you can to make as much noise like a drum, which is why they started the kendo. But if you're in the crowd, you're thinking submissions, pinfall.
Yeah. It was,
count out.
The kendo. As soon as you got two massive guys in amazing shape, just going straight for the kendo sticks, he just thought, act of like phony.
Yeah.
And from that moment, it really lost me. I didn't.
Well, that's the first moment.
Exactly.
Oh, right.
Yeah. I never really regained anything after that. I would like to have seen these two really go at it because I've quite enjoyed Apollo Crews' heel work, but we're never going to see it here.
And they're both amazing wrestlers, really athletic, big hit, hard hitting.
So, Shane, did you enjoy Wally?
Who? What?
The guy that did the entrance, the rapper.
I fast forwarded that bit. Do you know what I mean? I'd watched 2 NXT shows, another night of WrestleMania. I was like, well, I can get some time back in my life. I will. So I don't know. Did you enjoy it? Was it good? Should I go back and watch it?
Fast forwarded it. Oh. After that, we had the Hall of Fame interlude. Where we had this year's Hall of Fame class come out on stage, including Kane. Did you watch that?
No, I fast forwarded that. I don't really care. I watched a little bit of the Hall of Fame. Again, not much of it, so I'm definitely not going to watch them come out and just wave at me. What's the point?
Yeah, all right. Next up, we had the Women's Raw title. Rhea Ripley beat Asuka 13 minutes and 30 seconds. And we had another sort of rock star, I don't know who it is, but a rock star entrance sung, where Rhea Ripley's entrance was sung by a singer. Didn't explain that very well.
All right, so there was some entrance. Again, I fast forwarded that. What do you think of the match then? Because you didn't think much of the song, the performance.
Face versus face. I thought the crowd were a little bit off on this. Again, I didn't know if the crowd noise was being truncated in, but there didn't seem to be much interest. I thought it was a bit of a clash in terms of like chemistry and style. Asuka being more of a high flyer, Rhea Ripley being more of just a bruiser. And some of the moves were a little bit off. I didn't mind the Asuka drop kick off the top rope. And the DDT was nice. I quite like the finish. The Riptide, Rhea Ripley's finish. It was the right result for sure. But the match itself, if this was on Raw, I would have fast forwarded it.
Ouch. I think you're right. Though. I thought there was some nice and quick exchanges and sequences. And then Ripley slowed it down a little bit after a sort of quick start. A few submissions into a German suplex, let's say, and Asuka some top rope, a hip attack. And there's some decent work outside, culminating the bulldog on the outside. But while I say it was nice, that you're right. I don't know what it is, and I suppose maybe it's the chemistry or it's the sort of intangible, which they were putting up on the screen. It's intangible that you can't quite pin down. There was something missing from the match. It didn't quite click, and it's one of those that you can't really tell why, because you're sort of watching it thinking, this is all right, but something's missing. And that, I agree with you, something was missing there.
Yeah. Couple of points to note there. Firstly is on the following Raw, Charlotte comes out and beats up Rhea Ripley.
Oh, yeah.
So that's good.
Yeah.
What a way to deal with the new champion. But my last note really on this is that it needed to really be a line in the sand for Asuka on what's been a really underwhelming run.
God, yeah.
Not all her fault. There is a creative booking element to it too, but whether it's the creative, her gimmick, her lack of competition, trying to follow Becky, it's just been a forgettable, quite a long run as well.
Yeah, really poor. I think when she was working with Sasha and Bailey, the sort of what's that, last spring, a bit later than that maybe, but when she was working with them, she was doing fine. Then she got given the title, didn't she? And then she worked with them, and it was okay. But then since then, they just haven't backed her. And I do wonder if part of that's the gimmick, because I think in ring she's pretty good and holds her own. But how far can you go with a gimmick which is sometimes spitting green ink or whatever, doesn't really speak to the crowd or come across well in skits, just almost seems the weaker part of it. So I think that probably plays a part. You're right, it's good to get the belt off her. I don't know what she does now. I suppose she might be in a three-way with Ripley and Asuka, and Ripley and Flair, and you could say, Charlotte, I've beaten you both at WrestleMania, so I should be in the title match, rematch, whatever. But there was definitely something missing from this match, despite the fact it was fairly well executed.
Yeah, and we've now got 2 new female champions.
3 if you include NXT, I guess.
Yeah, Raquel Gonzalez. Yeah, absolutely. So interesting times ahead. But speaking of the females, there's then an angle on stage where Bailey came out with Hogan and Titus, and then got taken out by the Bellas, Nikki Bella.
Yeah. Why do they do this? Bailey is one of your top female stars. If you take Rousey out of the equation, Charlotte, Banks, Bailey, and Lynch, not saying anything surprising, they're the 4 horsewomen. They are your 4 leading lights in the women's division that you build everything around. You have been building everything around Bailey. Banks has got to where she was, because let's not forget she walked out of a WrestleMania or whatever a couple of years back. Wasn't sure what was going to happen with her. She has got to where she was because of her work with Bailey recently. That's allowed her to get back on track. Why do they do this? And they do it at the Raw reunion shows where the NWO come back and bury some current tag team on the roster. I don't like it. I don't enjoy it. And why you're doing that with Bailey, of all people, do it with some of the women that were in. Do it with Lana. I'm sorry, Lana, but do it with Lana, and get Bailey in the tag match. It's really, really. I've forgotten about it. It's really weak.
Just thought I'd throw that in because I knew that would grind your gears somewhat.
Yeah. It must grind your gears as well, because you're a big advocate of women's wrestling, and that's what Bailey's reduced to.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And what do we need? What does a super kick from Nikki Bella achieve? Really,
Well, it's a little bit Ms. Morrison-esque. Yes. It might be good for 5 minutes of rating, but you don't even know it's happening. But it might be good for 5 minutes of ratings or an advert for the new Bella show. But in the long term, what does that do to Bailey?
Here's the thing for you. On the Bella's acceptance speech, which I'm sure you watched and enjoyed, they truncated into the Thunderdome 1 more match chance.
I don't mind them having 1 more match. Like, you want to have 1 more match, fine. I actually think they've done a lot for women's wrestling in like the phase before the phase we are now. But you can appreciate them without having to see them super kick Bailey down a ramp. Poor.
Right, let's get to the main event. The triple threat match for the Universal title. Roman Reigns with Jey Uso and Paul Heyman against Edge and Daniel Bryan. 21 minutes and 40 seconds. Talk about a big match feel. The first thing that jumped off the page for me was like the shape that all 3 of them are in. Obviously different body types and whatnot, but absolutely phenomenal shape all of them have got themselves into. And that just kind of added to the visual of what this match was. For me, I think it would have been better as a one-on-one. I'd rather have seen Reigns and Edge or Reigns and Bryan rather than all 3 of them together, because triple threats by definition are a little bit messy sometimes. Austin would agree with me. But another negative is probably Jey Uso having so much involvement that he did.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from with that. I suppose the reason, just as a sort of counterbalance to that, is because triple threats are a bit awkward. And I know your answer will be we don't have a triple threat, but it just allowed for the start to flow a little bit better because he's involved. So that makes it a sort of 4-way. So everyone's doing something. But I take your point.
Yeah, but nevertheless, there's a frantic pace to begin with. The crowd are into it. Level of athleticism on display, like absolutely fantastic. That where they go to spear each other and sort of end up just sort of running into each other, like absolutely fantastic. To go back to the Cesaro Rollins match, where you're seeing stuff that you haven't seen or don't see on Smackdown every week.
Yeah, and including in that, you've got the Bryan dropped in a couple of the Benoit headbutts. We did a couple of those. Which I haven't seen him do for a long, long time. Tandem headbutts or whatever like that was really, really good. And you get some carnage with Bryan going through the announce table and Edge's spear and the double submission on Reigns. That was pretty decent, paying off the triple threat. And funny that they'd gone to such an extent to get that spot set up that there was a chair that had been adapted or adjusted to allow that to happen.
Yeah.
But that was really, really good as well. And Edge and the concertos played into his character. Decent, really decent. And it shouldn't be forgotten as well. Reigns has come back from leukemia. and Edge and Bryan have been medically retired, and yet all three of them are in the main event. So again, a bit like the context, or to an extent anyway, the context we're talking about with Brie, that's the Bellas, with Bel-Air and Banks. There's some context here that also can't be divorced from the actual product that we're watching.
You know what? They haven't really played on that in the build-up, but they should have done.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Rebooked. I guess they wanted to show more as three titans, maybe, rather than maybe that looks like a sign of weakness. But yeah, there's definitely something in that.
Definitely. I enjoyed some of the near falls on this match, despite this what we've moaned about on Wrestling Rebooked here about the volume of near falls. These were done really well. The double spear on Edge was fantastic. I mean, there was genuine interest in the match. I wrote, this is my notes, 3 points towards the end. There was genuine interest. You had no idea who would win, and everything was really emotionally charged. And that's sort of like the sort of perfect pot of for a wrestling match.
You're hurting me a little bit there, because I logged onto the WWE Network to watch it, and the first thing I saw was a spoiler that told me that Reigns had won, which I was sort of expecting anyway. But once you lose that element from the match, I probably lost 5% enjoyment, because I didn't have that. I don't know why they do that. It was a headline with an image of him holding the belt up. What about the finish, where the stacking, which he did allude to in his promo on SmackDown before?
I didn't notice that, but I don't mind that finish as long as it fits with storyline going forward.
How would it do that? For you, if it's to fit with storyline, what would that look like?
Well, Reigns, in the context of that match in storyline, has now buried Bryan and Edge as legitimate contenders. Fair enough. Edge won the Rumble. He's had his shot. He's not won. He's moved on. Bryan, in storyline again, he's talking about his build as his potential last WrestleMania. He had his big moment 7 years ago, and that's now come and gone as well. He's been stacked up and buried by Roman Reigns, the biggest, the most over guy on the card. He's the head of the table. I'm not sure if you realize that.
I got it, Jim.
He's wrecked everyone and left.
Yeah, he has. I mean, he talks in his promo about, he actually used the word stacking, and obviously he does that literally. I suppose there's a small element, and listening to you talk there about how he's buried them, finished them off, actually means that they've mitigated against this. There's the element of Edge saying, I won the Rumble, but I didn't get a one-on-one match.
Yeah.
And there's an element of Bryan potentially saying, but I still haven't had a legit one-on-one match. I had it after the Chamber, I had it since. So potentially you could argue there's leeway if they need it for rematches there, one-on-one. But like you say, given the nature of it, the way he's put them on top of each other, although I don't know if that means actually that Edge got the pin, but whatever. The way he stacked them on top of each other, maybe that sort of mitigates against that and goes, no. There's no rematch. I've dominated you.
Yeah.
I'm on to my next contender. It was probably the match of the night, I think. I'm just looking.
Owens and Zayn better than that? I think you probably have to say it was.
I think you have to say it was because of the title match. I mean, I maybe enjoyed Owens Zayn a bit more because of so my enjoyment level probably was higher for Owens Zayn's, but for the quality of match, I think Reigns, Edge and Bryan, and it so probably sneaks it, and that probably makes it the best match of the WrestleMania weekend for me, that main event. Probably that one, followed by Owens Zayn, and then maybe the women's Cesaro Rollins. I don't know. Yeah.
That's good to know. Thanks.
Yeah, it's a good way to end the show with a title match like that. That really delivered.
Yeah, there was some boos at the end. Again, don't know if they were being funneled into your thoughts by WWE, but it certainly puts heat on Reigns. In actual fact, the way that they could go now is Reigns saying, I've beaten all these old timers. Give me something young and fresh. And boom, walks Riddle.
I've seen SmackDown, so I know who in walks or walks in. Apparently as well, there was lots of Edge was the most over guy in terms of support in that match. Edge was getting more cheers than Bryan, and Bryan was getting a few boos during his yes kick segment. So that's interesting, seeing as WWE was very much trying to position Edge as the heel, and then as soon as they position him as the heel, he's the face. And Brian positioned as a face, classic Dodo. And of course, now Reigns is positioned as a heel, being booed for the first time legitimately, having obviously been a heel for so long, based on his reaction. But yeah,
thoughts
good.
On the two main events being the Lashley match and the main event here, with both heels winning.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Yeah,
I think that's fine. There was a thing way back, WrestleMania 2000 or something, when Triple H came out of the main event winning, and they said, "Oh, it's only the second or one of the few times a heel's come out and won," which is partly why Hogan apparently got involved way back when with Yoko, but not John and Yoko, but Yokozuna. It doesn't really make any difference to me. Honestly, I don't think about it at all, whether a heel or a face has won. Maybe that's just the age in me. I just want to see a decent match that fits with creative storyline and booking. I really don't care. I'm not looking to go home and think, oh, great, like the face has won. I just want to see a decent match, so I don't care.
Fair.
What about you? Are you upset that two heels have won the main event men's title matches?
On the contrary, the two guys that, and Lashley, as I said before, he wanted to win. Think he should win. It's best for business, as Stephanie used to say. And in Reigns, I think they would have booked themselves into a corner and moved the title on very quickly had either Edge or Bryan won.
I mean, with Reigns, he could be. You're looking at it now. He's definitely got some contenders in Zayn, Owens, Cesaro, Rollins. Like they're all potential contenders. You can go back to Bryan and Edge, but you don't really see any of them beating him. And really, that sets us up for WrestleMania 38 and Big E. That's where I could see them go. Well, that's where they should go. Let's have him keep the title for a long time. We've seen what happened. It doesn't really make sense. Why did they take the title off McIntyre to give it to Miz to allow Lashley to beat McIntyre? You could have just had it on McIntyre and have Lashley take it off him at WrestleMania. So let's have some long title reigns.
Yeah, because we lost it to Orton as well in the meantime. But all right. So overall thoughts on WrestleMania 37 before we close the book on it.
I thought it was a very good WrestleMania. I think it's one of the better ones, probably the best one since 31. I was thinking about WrestleMania 34, and that should have been really good, but the long time and some of the stuff they did with Strowman and Reigns and Lesnar means that, in a convoluted way, what I'm saying is I think this is the best WrestleMania for 5 or 6 years. I thought there were some really good, strong matches, both men's title matches. Bel-Air and Banks, I think all three of those are really good matches. I think on the undercard, you got Cesaro, Rollins and Zayn, Owens, really delivered. So that's really good. That's 5 decent matches on WrestleMania. I would add in my classic negative caveat that there were 2 nights. You could just get some decent matches, do one night, and it's sorted. Of the matches on the card, if you chuck in Sheamus, Riddle as well, there's your 6 plus 1, maybe Rhea Ripley, and that's your WrestleMania night one day. So very good WrestleMania, best one in a number of years. Sort of cheating because it's 2 nights. Can they make it into one night? Probably. Should they? Probably. Will they? They're saying they are, but they won't.
Why use 2 words when you can use 3,000?
The beauty of language.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in keeping with the theme of this episode, you've pretty much covered most points there. I think what I would add is something which I don't think you mentioned there, is the level of production that this show now is quite incredible. And if you look at it, stand back and look at it from a non-wrestling fan's perspective, like the production, the lights, the pyro, all the celebrities, the musicians, etc., that are like it's an amazing show to watch, and there's enough non-wrestling action for it to be interesting enough. So obviously we look at it from a borderline purist perspective, but the actual show is now incredible. Right.
Phenomenal in the way it's almost got, you're right, it's got something for everyone in the sense that as long as you don't want to sit there and analyze everything and give 3,000 word reviews, if you just want to go there and see some New Year's Eve style fireworks, there they are. If you want to hear a bit of music that maybe you wouldn't have heard, there it is. If you want to see some athleticism, there it is. And if you want to see some decent sort of storytelling, be that whether you consider it Shakespearean or panto, that's also there for you. And if you want to see a fight, it's there for you. 4 reasons to turn up.
Yeah, absolutely. Never heard from Ontario, did we?
No, not yet. But now we're on YouTube. They can dip in, have a look at us, and see if we're worth writing to.
Wrestling Rebooked. Until next time,
It's time to tap out.
Wrestling Rebooked. Spoiler in ND. Putting wrestling into submission. Welcome to Wrestling Rebooked with Spoiler and ND. Rewriting your favorite angles the way we want to believe. Putting wrestling into submission. Finally, that time has come. We used to rely on Meltzer. Now we bang our own drum. Wrestling Rebooked. Spoiler in ND. Putting wrestling into submission. The Spot Monkey is here, shooting from the hip, back to break more, and ready to let rip. Spoiler is the host. Will his mic be ready to go? He loves a Mac Clinic, and we're ready to start the show. From Mania to Survivor Series, a wrestling podcast. Each match rebooked, fresh views are cast. Wrestling Rebooked. Spoiler in ND. Putting wrestling into submission. Our finger is on the pulse for all the latest news. What's going on with Vince? We don't really get his views. We love a docking review, old school to new. I think it's time to tap out. Hit the music. We're through. Wrestling Rebooked. Spoiler in ND. Putting wrestling into submission.